I love that voice.
Oh,
That woman has the coolest voice ever. Okay. Okay. Where's my thing? Ooh, got it. I got it. Top secret files, key banking experiment, classified. Classified, yeah. Attention, Agent Sidney Bristow and Michael Vaughn. Has anyone seen Alias?
aliens?
Freaking Michael Vaughn is a stud. Okay, so, okay, Sidney Bristow. See, everyone knows who Jennifer Gardner is, right? Are you freaking kidding me? Jennifer
She's
Gardner.
I mean,
Isn't
maybe I
she
see
the
her
Hunger
picture and I'll
Games?
remember her, but like, I'm not a big celebrity like this.
You're saying you don't know things. I understand. Wait, no, that's a great point. You
Is
right,
that the
right,
Hunger
so-
Games gal? Is that who that is?
No, it's Jennifer Lawrence. man.
Oh, well, you know,
You don't have paparazzi info either. Listen, I want to actually before we start. Oh, man, my computer. You guys remind me when I'm done. I want to read you the opening of my next HIPPO lecture, guys. Tell everyone out there, the next HIPPO I think is my last HIPPO of the semester. It's November 3rd. I think Sophia attended the last one. Did you attend the first one as well?
No, because my Bible study meets at
That's
that
right.
time, so.
You guys were kind enough to come last time. Thank you.
Yeah, we cut half of our Bible study sessions to like different events
Oh,
going on in the
Cool.
church.
Well, that's really nice to hear. I think my next HIPPO is my last one because in December we'll just be Spirit Life. I think I'll resume HIPPO back in January. I am going so all out in this next HIPPO. It's gonna be called Christianity and Conspiracy Theories.
oh, that's right. I'm
I
looking forward to
cannot
that.
wait,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna read from I'm gonna basically what's basically gonna be is to the wall crazy, but also the serious message. The serious message is gonna be after I read like here's the history of America under 4 different interpretations from the post-war period, post-World War II. The traditional one, the providential one for believers who believe God's hands in history, the maybe Darwinistic one, if you're accidental, just like striving for power, Nietzsche style, and then there's the conspiratorial reading. And then I'll use that as a segue, talk about an alien abduction, where the alien is trying to piece, he has all these answers, but the main character trying to figure out like, okay, so you're okay, UFOs are real, cool, I'm on your spaceship, can you tell me about life? And all he wants to know is like, what is Let's Go Brandon? And then he's trying to ask for tips. His girlfriend, Moon Comet, has been like really cold to him. He's like, I'm trying to like make Moon Comet like me. Can you help me out? And it's all conversation like about women and stuff. And then it's gonna come back
Women and stuff.
and women and stuff.
A narrow.
Yeah, and then it's gonna come. Well, I think at one point I think I'm gonna sing the Applebee song again. Like, it's like, do you think Moon Comet would like that if I did the Applebee sing for her, like to woo her, you know? And the guy's gonna be like, I don't know. But it's gonna come back. It's gonna come back in, and I'm gonna basically say the real lesson is like Catholics and Christians of any stripe facing conspiratorial thinking nowadays. And there is so much like, where did the virus come from? Blah blah blah. New World Order. We have to avoid the oldest heresy in the church, which is Gnosticism, right? Which is like this kind of secret knowledge and stuff. Like the great Divine Mercy Chaplet slogan or faith, Jesus, I trust you, is that we trust. He preached openly. It's not about secret stuff. Like there's going to be a real serious message in there, but after a bunch of fun things. So, yeah.
Would you do me a favor with that? Somewhere work in a quote by Dr. Wesley Nagel or something like that, and see who gets it.
I'll actually see if I can get Wes. Please can you remind me? You're so good at emailing me. Seriously, if you can email me, I'd like to get his permission and make it like a real. According to ufologist Wesley,
There you go.
Dr. Wes Nagel of the what do you call it? The Pseudo Aeronautic Space Center on Roswell, New Mexico.
The Roswell suburb.
And Cecily opened up the
Yeah.
the talk. I already think what I'm gonna have for her say in the intro, like, you know, there's nothing more like American than this. Nothing more Area 51 American, get it? Like Roswell, like I want to that sounds so dumb. I want to make it like really annoying, cheesy, like stupid. Like, do you get it? UFOs? Oh, you know, like.
So you write your own intro?
I write the intro that she reads. I don't trust her to write her own stuff. Absolutely not. Like she's like a newscaster. Like I love the way she presents it. Awesome. If Cecily did the evening news, I tune in every night. Do I trust her to have the requisite, like, no, I have to write it for her. I'm kidding, of course. She could write her own stuff. I tell her every time, like, if you don't like it, change it, but She's so nice. She's so nice to humor me and help me out with the talks. Yeah, okay, so let's get started. Let's get to real stuff actually. And then at the end, I'll read you the intro if you guys want me to. All right, October 14th, 2021 on America. We're finally in America. I'm really excited as we've moved through the syllabus. It's been a lot of like stop and go in a good way, I think. We came out of the gate really hard, 1914 through 16, talking about the Western Front, the Eastern Front. In fact, next class again, I'm going to have a whole algorithmic recap, kind of like a formula that I'll put on the slide of the class to date through 1916. But right now we're getting really bogged down in a good way. Bogged down often colloquially, rightfully so, reasonably, has this negative connotation of being like stuck. I mean a good way. We're really going through the weeds right now. Historians, scholars in general, there's two kind of like lenses often. You can have the kind of bird's eye, 30,000 foot view of like just seeing the whole thing. And often in the first class that I taught here, I think Sophia, you asked me about the class that I taught at the Augustine Center. When I did that class, 1776 to the present, I spent one day on World War I. So we covered in one day, in an hour and a half, 1914 through 18. So it's total bird's eye view, just the top view. We've done a little bit of that in this class, but now it's like the other angles, like really they call truffle hunting, like digging through for mushrooms, like real the details. We're getting in that now, and we're going to get more with that. Pretty soon, I'm gonna have a whole lecture just on Grigory Rasputin, remember the opening lecture, the three kind of themes I talked about, the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, Sophie, Rasputin, and Our Lady of Fatima. We're getting to Rasputin, we're getting to Our Lady of Fatima, to these like real focused kind of events. Today is one of those as well. America, up through about where we are in the time. And where are we in the time frame? Well, I'd say if you want two kind of lodestars, two guiding points, I would put a flag on the Western Front of Verdun / the Somme in the chronology around the war, and on the Eastern Front, Brusilov offensive. That's kind of where we are. We've covered chronologically through, we haven't not got to 1917 at all yet. There's still, we've covered 14, 15, 16, there's still all of 17 and almost all of 18, because the Armistice Day is not until November 11th. So we have 2 years of work chronology that we're going to be just slowly gaining towards over the next coming weeks. Right now we're around mid-16, almost 17, right? All of you know this, but just, it's good to, I personally really enjoy keeping the chronology in my mind, because the numbers help me kind of stay focused on kind of where we are. Numbers matter, right? Okay, so we did a background on Europe. What about the United States, 1865 to 1914? How can I cover this in like 5 seconds? Well, the Civil War, the American Civil War, which again is the topic of our next class in the spring, is 1861 through 65. Thank God, a great benefit of the Civil War is the ending of slavery. Thank God, this great human rights step forward, the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863, of course, Abraham Lincoln's kind of crowning, achievement, the thing he's most famous for, the great emancipator. Okay, and slavery is indeed the prime cause of the war, but I would argue that in terms of lasting effects, something that is equally important is the triumph of federalism, the triumph of centralized government. People will often say, kind of like CNN people, Fox News people, the Let's Go Brandon people, that are just like, really, it's like one fact, tear the statue down, or it's good, or the non-nuance, just I want the fact in 5 seconds. We'll be like, oh, well, yeah, the war, states' rights, that was just a euphemism for slavery. Okay, they're right. Again, slavery is the top cause, and often people advocating for states' rights wanted it so they could have federal government out of their decisions concerning slavery. That's true, but it's not as simple as that. There also is this long-standing tradition going back to the founding fathers of, are we more like Alexander Hamilton, and do we like doing Broadway musicals with Lin-Manuel Miranda, or are we like Thomas Jefferson, who is for agrarian states' rights, localism? And the previous joke, which completely bombed, what I really meant to say was Alexander Hamilton is in centralized government, central bank, federalism. Are we like Rome in the north, where all roads lead to Rome, and Washington, D.C. should speak for the whole country, and Spearfish, South Dakota, it's not even in South Dakota, just Spearfish, USA, it's Boise, USA. We can just eliminate all the lines on the map. We're just one country, and all that matters is that centralized diamond star capital in Washington, D.C. That's the northern vision, and that's the vision that's triumphed, obviously. Or are we in this kind of Catholic social teaching about subsidiarity? What can be done on a local level should be done on a local level. States' rights, even less than states' rights, about county rights, right? Latah County shouldn't do what Ada County does, even though we're all in Idaho, kind of thing. The Civil War, following 1865, is the triumph of federalism, centralized money, centralized power, and nothing cements this more than manifest destiny. Then the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869, which enables grandma, who used to have to go horse and buggy 6 months from New York to San Francisco, to now cross the country in 6 days. Globalization and technology, the greatest evidence pieces, the greatest extant proof of this today in things like planes and 5G internet and whatever is the newest cutting edge stuff. Globalization always aids centralization because it makes things feel smaller, right? If it takes 6 months for me to go to New York to San Francisco, I'm going to identify less with those people because they're so far away. If I can hop in a plane in New York and be in San Francisco that same day, well, yeah, why can we not just erase the Spearfish and Gillette, Wyoming, and wherever in between, Logan, Utah, little municipalities, they can become flyover countries, just one kind of thing. This is the big thing that happens after the American Civil War. And anyone know what it really cements? Because in the 19th century, America is kind of inward looking. Manifest destiny, build up the West. There's a lot of horrible stuff. In addition to slavery, like the removal of Native Americans, the Trail of Tears. There's perhaps the most racist sounding act ever passed, where it's like obvious what we mean. In 1882, Congress passes the Chinese Exclusion Act. I mean, they might have called it Get Chinese People Out of America Act. I mean, there's nothing like subtle about it. People were mad, Americans in the East, white Americans were mad that because the Chinese people, immigrants have been building the railroads in the West. Well, there's a lot of workers coming in and like that. It's kind of the same question you have to say about immigration. Maybe we like people foreigners doing jobs we don't want to do, but we don't want them to have voting rights, no way, right? That kind of hypocrisy. There's a lot of that going on, good and bad stuff, and yet the focus is kind of domestic. Make America strong, unified, grow based on the Monroe Doctrine, keep the monarchies and imperial ambitions out of America. America's for democracy and for Americans. What changes this? Does anyone know? First in 1893, then 1898.
You talked about like the Spanish American War.
Yeah, perfect, excellent answer. It's exactly what I'm looking for. It's the second part. But even in 1893 first, Frederick Jackson Turner's famous frontier thesis at the World's Fair in Chicago, hey, the frontier's stitched up, what's next? I guess America's got to go to the world now. And in 1898, the Spanish-American War, right, where we decide we are no longer content to work on domestic issues, but we want to annex places like Guam and the Philippines and Cuba, Platinum, and these kind of things that will come later on, which directly lead into Theodore Roosevelt's 1904 corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, which says it all. The Monroe Doctrine of 1823 said basically, again, it's Europe, stay out of America. America's going to focus on itself. It's America first kind of thing. The corollary is, yeah, and by the way, we can respond to any threats to our interests in the whole Western Hemisphere. Roosevelt says now America, the idea of America isn't just the contiguous US. We don't have Alaska and Hawaii yet. Hawaii is just coming into a territory because they're not states. Anywhere in the Western Hemisphere, including like Mexico and Colombia, we own that place. Right? The beginning of the American exceptionalism we'll see in the 20th century, America being the world police, begins around this time. 1904, our involvement in the Panama Canal. I didn't know it was Panama, Alabama. Why are we messing with Panama? Because we can, because it's America. We're growing. And the number one lesson you have to learn, please, is nothing exacerbates America's rise to first world import and then eventually post-World War II superpower status than World War I. At the beginning of World War I think it's hilarious because now I think our military budget is something like, of course it's number one in the world, but I think it's like double the next 7 combined or something, like double what Russia and China spend in the military. Don't quote me, but something exorbitant, it's insane. And we're everywhere involved in the world, despite the pull-out of Afghanistan or whatever that was, whatever that's going to be. Like we're still everywhere involved in the world. In fact, people often talk about like Korea and Japan completely depend upon their security. There's the American umbrella in East Asia. Like I didn't know Japan again was part of America. Like the European Union, Trump, when he was telling Angela Merkel he wants more than 2% of their GDP invested in European defense. I didn't know Germany was a U.S. state. And I'm not trying to come off as some like big American first person. Oh, we should just focus on ourselves. But it's like, why are we spending billions of dollars everywhere in the world? Maybe we could have our highways not have 1 million potholes in them, right? That might, I don't know. That's what I would think. But I don't know. America at the start of the First World War has like a joke army. It's like 20th, 30th in the world. It's unbelievable almost compared to the age that we grew up in. It's like there's no way, that's a typo. After World War I, the big guy, Woodrow Wilson, president, the kind of active ingredient of American growth, the process, the procedure of the economic aid first to the Allies, and then later the American, a lot of them, the heroic work to defeat Germany in some ways. I don't want to say America single-handedly beats Germany, it's not true, but again, we're the key ingredient. That is the ultimate lesson for World War I in America. If you want one, I only have time for one thing about America in World War I would say it makes America a world power. Why also though? Okay, we covered that. It makes America a world power because from 1865 there's been federalism, that's good, it's one big country. You can't have a bunch of states' rights people become a world power. They can't even agree upon. Georgia thinks Alabama is a foreign country, right? If that's the case. So you have to first of all erase all the state lines, have this federalized notion. So we have that. We start entering the world stage, as Sophia said, with the Spanish-American War, the Panama Canal, all these kind of things. Okay, that's good. And then during the war, funding the war in a certain sense, money is so important. Money makes the world go around. And then American military involvement. I get that. What's the other reason that post-World War I, we're going to really be ready to emerge as pretty soon the world power? What's a key thing? Think about what you've learned so far about the war. Talk to me about this.
Well, I'm gonna just guess that as the other European countries decimate their populations.
That's exactly it. Their population and their environment and everything. No battles are fought on American soil. That's good for Americans. We're not rebuilding out of any rubble. Not only are we funding them, getting them in debt to us, taking over, I think in a certain sense, the financial center at this time, the first time ever, becomes New York City. New York City is the city that never sleeps. If I can make it there, I can make it anywhere. Kind of the number one, the Wall Street place. That was always London. But the British are going to come into our bankers now. The banking will switch to America. So much of that is helpful that the battles are not taking place in Philadelphia and New York, but in places, Flanders Fields and outside of Paris, right? Okay, that's the number one lesson. Teleology, first, the end, and the whole. Okay. Starting in 1917, the US really starts making significant contributions. Okay. 10,000 men a day arrive on the Western Front in the summer of 1918. Teleology means starting at the end at the beginning. We're of course going to cover this point by point later on, right? But I'm just telling you now, like, here's what to expect. We're not going to stop talking about America pretty soon once the Americans arrive in 1917. During the war, the US will mobilize over 4 million military personnel, while only, God rest all their souls, but only losing 65,000 men. Guys, France in the first couple of months of the war, in the Battle of Frontiers, lost 65,000 men like in 2 weeks. The British lose 60,000 men in one day on the Battle of Somme. I mean, that's really great for America in terms of what we just talked about, being able to fund and be important without suffering a lot of loss. It's having your cake and eat it too. Well, we became the world power. We lost, all these men. No, that's the Brusilov offensive. Remember, the most successful Allied push by the Russians. They lose all their men, 1 million men, and that leads to the Russian Revolution. This is having your cake and eat it too. This is I lost 26 pounds and got 6-pack abs by eating cake every day, right? And my diet became much worse, and I look better than ever. But this is impossible. This is a great deal the Americans come up with. To quote Trump's, the best deal ever. No one has ever seen a deal like this. How does he do that?
Yeah.
I think the shoulders too, like. Woodrow Wilson has an exaggerated, over-the-top impact on what happens during this war. We're going to talk about him a lot. Woodrow Wilson is arguably the most important figure of, well, no, he's not the most important figure of the 20th century. There's no way I can claim that. Maybe the first quarter of the 20th century. We'll find out later. So, what happens first? Number 3. Okay, 1914, Wilson and neutrality. Okay, let's talk about Wilson now then, I guess. Why not? Woodrow Wilson is a dude who was born in 1856 in Georgia. He remembered as an 8-year-old boy seeing Ulysses S. Grant and the bad Yankees, Sherman and the Yankees go through on the famous Sherman's March, Gone with the Wind, burning Atlanta, all that. You remember that as a kid. And I think now, like, dang, like my son Soren is 8 years old. Like he just turned 8. You when you're 8 years old, and I remember things from when I'm 8. You remember things from 8 years old. So it wasn't like, oh yeah, his grandma kind of said it to him, when he was 3 months old, and he just had this precocious, like, he just felt the presence of the Yankees. Like he remembered seeing this, like stepping outside since his childhood, seeing the Yankees devastate the South, which is interesting because this guy is like very, and Wilson unfortunately lives in some way, I'm not trying to talk bad about him, but he lives some of the worst stereotypes, like Southern racism. Wilson at the Versailles Conference, his big idea, this League of Nations, which we're going to talk a lot about in this semester, was we tried to make the world safe for democracy. Now, if everyone is 3 musketeers, one for all, we'll avoid war forever. The perpetual peace stuff. A lot of so-called, what we would say today, people of color, or minorities, non-white European leaders, non-European leaders, excuse me, including the famous Ho Chi Minh, the famous communist leader of Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh, go to Versailles. And they're like, hey, I love your idea. I want to lose Vietnam. And Wilson basically says, like, yeah, but you're a person of color. This doesn't apply to you. Like, you can't implement. I'm talking about white people doing this. Like, Wilson screens and loves D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation at the White House. Like, arguably the most racist movie ever made. So Wilson definitely has, and again, this is not just him being a Southerner, but unfortunately, like, racism is much more like tolerated in society this time, openly tolerated. So Wilson does have those aspects of the South, you can say. But Wilson is very non-Southerner for being a Southerner. Wilson makes his mark as the president of what university? Does anyone know? And this is a meteoric rise. I mean, this is unbelievable. Wilson becomes president of what school? The University of Idaho. Okay.
I thought it was New York. Is that?
You're close.
Okay.
No, it's not way off. One of my favorite people in the world is Amy McNally. When she left, everyone knows she left, right? I took it as a personal betrayal. She's one of the coolest people I've ever met. I seriously, like, don't get me started on Amy McNally. So funny, so nice, freaking, like, Amy McNally should be the CEO of like a company that like shorts other companies and does like insider trading. I mean this as a compliment. Amy McNally was once over our house. She's really good friends with my wife, Kate. And I love this, that she's sharp as a tack and I never can get her. And then I got her this one time because I introduced Amy McNally to my cousin who lives with us. He's a sophomore at WSU. I'm like, oh, why don't you meet? This is my former colleague, Amy. She actually was the only person in Pullman history. She was a mayor 10 years ago. She's the only person to get impeached twice in Pullman history. Impeached for like corruption or something. I laugh and joke because Amy McNally is the most honest, non-corrupt, coolest person of all time. Seriously, Amy McNally is a living saint. And the reason I mention her is she is an alumna of this school, Princeton. Amy McNally went to Princeton along with her husband Matt. They both, I think, they're in training, theological training with Princeton Theological Seminary. Woodrow Wilson makes his mark as president of Princeton. What's crazy is the next year he becomes governor of New Jersey. He's president of Princeton in 1911, becomes governor, or 1910, 1911, he wins a presidential election in 1912. So this is, I don't know, who's the president of University of Idaho? Anyone know? Seriously, I really don't know.
C. Scott Green.
Oh, yeah, that is, that's true.
C. Scott Green. Okay, so imagine C. Scott Green in the next cycle becomes governor of Idaho, and the next year is president of the US. You're like, dang, C. Scott Green, like, bro, in less than 3 years, you went from president of Idaho, University of Idaho, which I'm not mocking it. Being a university president is a big deal. It's a prestigious job. Remember them talking about anyone knows the Nebraska Senator Ben Sass? He's considered as like rising star in the Republican Party. They were talking for a while. He's from Nebraska, and he might take over the presidency of the University of Nebraska. And I thought, like, man, like being a senator, it's like Julius Caesar stuff, Roman forum. That's the ultimate. Like being a senator is freaking sick. That's so cool. But the fact that he's even considering it, being a university president is a big deal. But it's not the same as being a freaking governor or the bleeping president of the United States. This is an insane rise. This doesn't ever happen. Okay, if C. Scott Green became the next candidate of whatever party president, you'd be like, that's crazy, right? That's amazing. Like, that guy must have insane political chops or be connected. It's not normal. We're not like every political season. We're not going and looking at, oh, I wonder if what university presidents will run for president of the country. It's always amongst governors, senators, whatever, businessmen from New York. Reality TV stars.
C. Scott Green sounds like a children's.
C. Scott Green, Anne of Green Gables. C. Scott Green reads Anne of Green Gables. Hey kids, back in 1821, Rare Rabbit got stuck in the patch. Oh, Rare Rabbit, you silly bear. I don't know the Rare Rabbit story. You wouldn't know that story. It's like, they would know, no?
I mean, like, it's.
Maria, do you know anything about anything?
Like, the gist of it is like this, rabbits being bullied by some sort of predatory
Oh,
animal.
the gist of it, okay, cool.
And like, he says, like, oh no, don't throw me into the spiky
Oh,
river,
right.
that would be the worst thing. And he throws him in, and he's like, oh, joke's on you, like, I live here, so, and then he runs away, like, that's
It's the first example of trolling.
it.
Thanks, yeah, that's right, that's good. So Wilson gets thrown into a patch, he's like, don't throw me into this patch, but he's like, I live here, and he becomes president, and no. Wilson, when the war starts, is all about neutrality, because of something that I have over here, 1796. George Washington, in his farewell address, counseled Americans not to get involved in European affairs. Just stay out of Europe, all you do is they fight each other, whatever. So Wilson, at the beginning of the war, has this idea of we are going to stay out of the war, okay? In fact, Woodrow Wilson, 1916, his re-election campaign is he kept us out of the war. All right, so in the beginning, there's this idea of neutrality in America. And why? Demographics. Listen to this. Demographics. In the 1910 census, the dominant native language in America, 3.3 million Americans spoke English, but the second one was German, 2.7 million. That's not a big discrepancy. Like I said, I mentioned this before, I think there were 83 German-only language newspapers in places like Philadelphia, Cincinnati, scattered all throughout. To this day, German is the largest ethnic group in America. I looked this up recently, it was like 17% of all Americans have German heritage of some, however distant, however close. The next is Irish, 15%. Guess what? Both the Germans and Irish hate England, right? For different reasons, okay? So Woodrow Wilson and the neutrality, you can write two prongs down. At the start of the war, America is neutral for two reasons, amongst more. But one is that long tradition of American isolations, and despite what's been going on in the past 20 years, thank you, Sophia, of the Spanish-American War, the Panama Canal, despite that, America is still very much the George Washington farewell address, Monroe Doctrine, stay out of Europe, Europe bad. America good, very kind of simplistic, just dichotomies, focus on America, stay out, that's one. But the second thing is Wilson, who's a politician, realized I don't want to take off a large contingent of my population. A lot of those 3.3 million English speakers are Irish, all right? So maybe you can say sympathetic towards not the Allies, because I don't know if I say the Irish are necessarily directly allied with the German, but they're anti-British. The anti-British contingent between pro-German people from Prussia and from the former Holy Roman Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire. In fact, I think my grandmother told me, God rest her soul, she was telling me a story when it was a big moment of pride for her that my family, obviously my name, I'm 100% Polish, like in so many ways. Like my mom is actually from Poland, my dad is like, his grandparents came over, I'm Polish through and through. But on my grandmother's side somewhere, I have Slovak blood, and which is basically the same thing as Polish. She's saying, I'm from Idaho, actually from Montana, yeah, it's the same thing. And Wyoming, yes, no difference whatsoever. But my great grandfather something was a footman for Franz Josef. So these people like in this area, the emperor guy who dies during this war, right? The Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Kaiser. There's a lot of sympathy for Austro-Hungary / Germany, and Wilson is an intelligent politician, he's very shrewd. Even his haters and enemies are like, he was really, really shrewd kind of guy. Of course, he's an academic, he's a university president. He knows how to like play people off on each other and get money, right? And like whatever. He knows he doesn't want to anger just the base in America, when a lot of people probably are not, super excited about the war. We're going to break this down. Yeah, Dave, you want to say something?
So I was just gonna kind of in a summary of what you said. Is it fair to say that a great part of the American population was rooting for Germany? At that.
A lot of people, I wouldn't say if rooting, I mean, maybe. I think a lot of people, there's this big push for assimilation in America. Compare and contrast assimilation versus diversity. I'm not here to judge, but diversity is kind of one of the data, we should celebrate our differences. Like, I come from, Ivory Coast, I come from Cambodia, China. When I'm in America, I should be still super Cambodian. Why is it that like I speak fluent Polish because my kids speak fluent Polish? Why was my dad didn't speak Polish until he met my mom in Poland and learned it like from my mom. Because him growing up, despite having Polish parents, they didn't want to speak Polish. It was that traditional 1950s, like, we're not going to speak German, we're not going to speak Russian at home because we want to be 100% American. That Ellis Island thing, it doesn't matter. We come to America, you're the melting pot, assimilate. A lot of the Germans who came to America were like, I'm an American only. I don't care. That's the old homeland. I don't want to be anti-German and support people fighting Germany because those are my people. I still have some pride. I wouldn't say necessarily we're rooting for it. They were rooting for neutrality. That's the old world. I came to America. I identify as an American now, despite even the fact that I speak American in very broken English. German's my main language. That's not me anymore. I came through Ellis Island. I've been like made new. I'm an American. I'm a born again citizen now of America. I just prefer neutrality. In so many ways, Wilson, being a smart politician, they're kind of asking him subtly, just don't support any side. Just let America be America. That's what America is. America is off to the side. Just leave it be. It's Europe and they always fight each other. It's more of that, I think, than kind of outright support, I would say. We're going to see pretty soon how it becomes really soon outright support for the Allies, anti-German sentiment becomes hyper fever pitch in the first propaganda, Facebook, Trump, Cambridge Analytica style like propaganda campaigns. There's some of this now. Again, for the 1000th time, so much of what is present today is first found in World War I. We're going to see this again soon. What starts to change a bit in 1915? Well, we know the sinking of the Lusitania. If the Germans are going to do their U-boat stuff, that is going to perhaps start tilting the favor against the Germans, tilting the scales towards perhaps supporting those people fighting the Allies. Because the last time I checked, the British weren't torpedoing our boats and killing our citizens. That very kind of, you remember from last class, we talked about the Battle of Jutland, right? Despite Germany winning that naval battle, why is it a clear British victory? Because the Germans are bottled up and they must continue with this submarine warfare. That the ultimate failure, please write this down, remember this, the ultimate failure of the German U-boat campaign, the fact they keep doing it, is it brings America into the war against them. The ultimate failure of the U-boat campaign isn't the tactical efficiency, because it is pretty efficient, it works in terms of neutralizing the British dominance on the seas. The ultimate problem is it eventually tilts the favor of world opinion, and especially American opinion. And America at this time is ready to step out on the world stage as a great financier, a great manpower player against the Germans. But yet, for that, USA has something going on with Mexico. Ooh, okay, let's read about this. In April of 1914, there's something called the Tampico Affair. Okay, a minor incident involving U.S. sailors and Mexican land forces loyal to who was then the Mexican president, this guy Huerta, during the Guerra de las Facciones, faction wars, the phase of the Mexican Revolution, been going on for a couple of years now. As a result, the U.S. will occupy the port city of Veracruz. Okay, and this battle of Veracruz will last for 7 months. So, if it's not enough that we're trying to be demographically neutral and just neutral in general because that's what America does, we're actually involved in a different war. This isn't Donald Trump, build that wall, chanting whatever, Mexico's gonna pay for the wall. We're actually fighting a real war with the Mexicans when World War I breaks out. I love in this class how we continually go back and weave through the threads. This is April 1914, guys, is 3 months before when I opened this class, before the assassination of Franz Ferdinand and Sophie in Sarajevo, before the first shots are fired of this world-changing event. America's already been at war for 2 months with Mexicans. Is it kind of a stupid war? Kind of. The occupation of Veracruz lasts for 6 months, and at least the fall of Huerta, who resigns in July of 1914, as the July crisis is raging in Europe, we're going to go to war, not he resigns. But it just increases massive anti-American sentiment in Mexico, which can be traced back to 1848. 1848 is the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which ends the Mexican-American War. The old provinces of Tejas y Coahuila, which used to be part of Mexico, had formed north of the Rio Grande as the Republic of Texas, an independent country from 1836 to 45. Texas becomes annexed to the U.S. There's this Mexican-American War on that borderland 13 years before, 61 before the American Civil War, in which we get all of Nuevo Mexico, which is not simply just New Mexico. Now, Nuevo Mexico and Alta California, Upper California, i.e. just California kicks off the gold rush. This is very important for American history, not for this class. This is not, I don't want to go off into new rabbit holes. Basically, Mexicans are already really pissed at us for, as they see us stealing Texas and this kind of war that they claim is a false flag operation, meaning that Americans like started on purpose to have a pretext to take this land. Well, this already gets even worse now. The Mexican and American relations in World War I suck. They're like ground level. That's why next class I'm talking about ZMTLG, which is a abbreviation for Zimmerman telegram. This is one of the most scandalous things in the war, diplomatically speaking. The Germans cable the Mexicans and say, we know you guys hate America. Remember 1848? Remember freaking Veracruz, 1914? If you guys attack the Americans, we'll give you Texas back and Arizona and stuff. It's actually an interesting offer. People think, oh, I'm so stupid. Not really that stupid. Mexicans really hate the Americans. And there's some stuff going on here already with the war. Okay. And the Germans, pretty brilliant idea. Why not open up? Why not make the Americans have to focus on that? And they'll never get involved in Europe. If Mexico actually attacks the US in an all-out war, not just the occupation of Veracruz, but an all-out war, it's possible America can't be really involved in Europe because they're getting raids across Texas border, which is already happening. Anyways, Blackjack Pershing, before he goes to command of the American forces during the 100 Days Offensive in 1918, the famous American general, was involved in these Mexican campaigns, kind of vigilante activity on the borderlands in the Southwest. If this breaks into a full-fledged conflagration, then yeah, it's not a bad idea. The point is the code is broken. And it's a huge diplomatic blunder, and it will lead to America getting directly involved in the war. We directly get involved in the war in 1917, one of the most important years in all of world history. I mean, in so many ways. 17, America enters the war, the operations of Marlene Fatima, the Russian Revolution, the Bolshevik. It's one of the most important like, singular years in all of human history.
What was America in Mexico in 1914? What started that? What were they fighting about?
I think they didn't like the policies of the president, Huerta. This is a very traditional thing that we'll see actually put out later on with like Ronald Reagan. And that guy, you know, whatever, that guy's the bad word, the B word for illegitimate child, but he's ours, right? Like he's a bad guy, like getting involved in like, look what it's basically in a similar, not to make it to, wow, cup of coffee first.
It's like us in Cuba, us in
I was gonna
Noriega.
exactly say Cuba, exactly. It's not overcomplicated, to simplify it. It's like us removing, or us being angry when Batista is the guy who precedes Castro. And Batista, for all intents and purposes, at first was not a good dude, but he enabled like there was lots of brothels and like capitalism, and Americans could like make lots of money off Cuba. And it was like he was doing what we wanted him to do. He was playing by the rules of this Roosevelt corollary. Everything is our backyard in the Western Hemisphere. Fidel Castro comes in, you too. God have mercy, a horrible guy, but he's the wrong kind of bad guy. He's a communist. And look at the Bay of Pigs and the Cuban Missile Crisis, and like Khrushchev with missiles in Cuba. We can't have that. Just get involved somehow. I think basically just comes down to geopolitics and the Roosevelt idea. Mexico is ours. We cocky American states in our backyard. If the wrong guy who claims a dictator is there, we have to get involved. We just can't stand for this for certain types of leaders to be in certain places. It's like
a Shaw and the Ayatollah.
Absolutely. Literally, yeah. You keep them coming because your comparisons are spot on. It's literally, yeah, 1979. The Shah, was he a great leader for the Iranian people? He's kind of an American puppet. He rules Iran from 53 to 79. But we don't want the Ayatollah Khomeini because he's actually anti-American and anti-Israel and like anti-our interests in the Middle East. Exactly. I think it's more of a geopolitical interest kind of game that precipitates the crisis more than anything else. That's not that Mexicans don't charge across the border and start attacking us. It's just more of like, we don't want that guy there on our border, on our doorstep. If there's an invading army in Belgium, that's like a gun pointed at us in Britain. If the wrong guys in Mexico, it's like having a gun pointed at us. We say we gotta get that guy out of there. Huerta does resign in the midst of this crisis. 1916 presidential election, Wilson defeats Hughes, the former Republican governor of New York. Here's what happens. The issues are America first, war, or whatever. Wilson, sneaky guy, sly guy, runs a campaign on, listen, this is his campaign. Donald Trump campaign, right, was make America great again. Hillary Clinton, stronger together, right? Biden, build back better, whatever. Wilson's campaign slogan was literally, he kept us out of the war. Vote for this guy because he kept us out of the war. As soon as he wins re-election, he starts getting ready to get people in the war, right? Which never has happened in political history. Wilson is the first and only dishonest politician in world history. As soon as he wins re-election, it's like, okay, cool. So now I'm like, not a lame duck, but I'm in my second term, I can't get more terms. Actually, at this point, he can.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
can. FDR has 4 terms. It's not until he dies in office in 44, they say, let's go back and honor Washington too. He can have more terms. He won't because he dies. Wilson dies in the post, when he's doing like a train tour after the war. He's already in poor health, God bless him. Declining health, he might have a stroke or something. He's just really kind of on death's doorstep. And what really kills him is going across America trying to get support for League of Nations. Anyone know what one of the most strident opponents of the League of Nations is? This is our guy, our dude, Treasure Valley. Who am I talking about? William Mora, the senator from Idaho. He is super anti-Wilson, anti-Lee. He's super America first. Mora is like, no, we don't want to send American troops to fight like battles in Luxembourg and crap like that. Wilson's like, any threat to people in the League is a threat to all. It's the first kind of like, neocon, super involved everywhere, world police. And Mora, the Idaho guy's like, no. And he actually texted this from a hot spring in Idaho while he's smoking cigars. Out and he's like, I want to just be in the great outdoors here.
Tonight, this is a distraction, but I wanna, Teddy Roosevelt, okay, so he ran, he's president, no, he's vice president. McKinley dies, is assassinated.
Yes, and Roosevelt takes over.
So he takes over, and that was 1 year into McKinley's presidency, and Roosevelt said, well, I'm gonna count this as one of my terms, 3 years, 1 term. And then he runs again and he's elected, so he's got 7 years.
Okay.
And then he says, I'm not gonna run again because I'm counting that first one.
Right. Okay.
But we just sort of discovered together in conversation that, yeah, you could have multiple, more than.
Yeah,
two
he
terms.
tries to run again on the Bull Moose Party.
Well, but he was still, yeah, he was the only guy that ever came back like another term later. He failed, but I guess what I'm getting at is the premise that I was taught, I guess, was that he felt he had served his allotted 2 terms, later changed his mind, whatever. But back then there were no 2-term limits.
So not until after FDR. Right?
So, okay, so that whoever's taught me that.
I just know by fact, FDR dies in his 4th term. FDR would have been president for 16 years, crazy.
Right.
And FDR, and a lot of people criticize him, like he was like,
He was a king.
oh yes, and a wolf in sheep's clothing is really bad because it often refers to like literally serving the devil. I'm not saying that about FDR at all, really, God have mercy on him. I'm saying that kind of thing like FDR, people said every time he talked to you, you had the impression that he not only supported your position, but he thought it was his, and he like Toy Story, you left the room like, dang, what a swell guy, and then he would do the exact opposite. Like he just was like the shrewdest politician of all time, ever.
Huh.
And so FDR, like, it played everything up, right? Like, of course you have to reelect him. I got us out of depression. Actually, a lot of his policies made the depression worse. They did, stalled recovery. But he's like, I'm the depression president. I created the Social Security, this third rail now, the TWA, all these kind of things. I reimagined the American economy, and guess what? I'm the war president too, right? The reason FDR stays in office so much is look at the grandeur of the times around him. He's the president in the Depression and immediately World War II. Like no one's gonna be like, oh yeah, get the guy out, get our leader out in the middle of World War II. It's just changed forces then. FDR, I mean, he dies, period. He dies on the throne as king in a certain sense. Who knows how long he would have gone on. Would Lincoln have been like president for life? Who knows? I know they tried to make Washington King George I. He famously, stepped back from that. But at this time, yeah, Woodrow Wilson, I don't know if how long he would have gone on, but he dies, trying to keep campaign for the League of Nations. Once he becomes elected, he totally switches gears. So let's talk really fast for the purpose of time. You're gonna have the Selective Service Act, the Espionage Act, okay? And right away, okay, the Selective Service Act of 1917, this is being drafted already in December of 1916. Dang, son, right? December of 1916. A month after the election, he kept us out of the war. He's drafting the bill to draft, actually Teleology accepted, double, because drafting for the draft. Because he envisions, we're assuming get involved in the war. We're not in the war yet. Yeah, buddy, it's coming. Espionage in 1917. Yeah, anyone who says anything bad about America is a spy. It's like today, right? If you say something bad about a person you don't like, you're actually a threat to American democracy or whatever. Like, again, World War I, thanks for inventing this, Like, we have free speech in America or not? Can we say, let's go Brandon or no, right? If you can't, then it's like, what's up with that? Seriously, right? I think if I was Biden, that whole thing would make me laugh. I mean, you gotta be as a politician, like.
If he runs again, that's gotta be his slogan. Let's go, Brandon.
That would, again, I'm not gonna say how much I support or don't like Biden. I'm not gonna say, I will always keep my personal politics out of it. But that would be an epic win for him to have that be a slogan, like turn it back around. You know, like, yeah.
Why not?
That's like, you know, martial arts, like using that person's strength against them. Like, yeah, go chant it. This is my thing. Yeah, my slogan is literally, you know, hashtag let's go Brandon. Right. Okay, so right away, Wilson, after with all the demographic realities and stuff, kept us out of the war, and all the while we are funding the war effort. Let me see if I can find you the actual stats and how much what we're actually funding them for. Blah 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 blah. I don't have it actually. I thought I did though. I really thought I did.
So selective service, it was created then?
As far as I know, yes. I know like the income tax was made in 1913 and so much stuff around this area. Really.
First income tax was 1861.
1861, but I think a national income tax. There was something with tax in 1913. So
Yeah.
then it was like became a pillar of the American economy, the American collection of funds. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, here's the stats I was looking for you. Okay, here's the stats. Without losing my train of thought, sorry for bouncing around so much. But again, Wilson basically 1914 we're neutral. His election campaign kept us out of the war. As soon as he gets in the war, he goes towards passing the Selective Service Bill, readying that because we have to have men come in the war. So obviously, not only to keep us out of the war, it's going to be he got us into the war. And remember, Wilson made the kind of like Planned Parenthood argument concerning abortion. Remember, I said there's that famous dissenter, Benjamin Salmon, who said there's no just war ever. And just like people who are proponents of abortion are like, well, if you're pro-life, you should actually, really be for abortion clinics because, avoiding back alley abortions, etc. That's the most pro-life thing you can do. It's kind of logic. Wilson was like, if you're a pacifist, you should be the most for war because this war will end all wars. No, I don't think so.
It's like our missiles that are named peacekeepers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think the word Orwellian is overused, but it's kind of Orwellian. Like, if you really want peace, you should be all about nuclear weapons. Okay. Anyways, when he gets elected, it's right away getting the Selective Service Act ready. And I don't like what Sophia and Maria say. They are these people that protest the war. So under the Espionage Act to threaten them if they make speeches against me in public square, that can arrest them. So we're gonna eliminate any opposition to people that say, "Oh, weren't you the guy that kept us out of the war? Isn't this hypocrite much?" And you can go to that jail cell, right? In fact, like Eugene Debs, the famous socialist candidate, is jailed, I think, for the entire war for protesting the war. Debs runs as a literal socialist candidate for president of America like 65 times, and I think his combined 65 runs gets like 1% of the vote. Like he always gets his butt kicked, but he always comes back for more. He's like a worse version of Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders, I'm not kidding, actually has a picture of Debs in his office. So to remind, like, at least I'm not that guy.
Are you sure? Seriously?
Yeah,
Really?
I'm dead serious. And this isn't like, oh, gotcha, see Bernie's economy. It's not that, I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
I'm saying like, no, yeah, Debs is he's the American socialist guy. He's the George Washington of American socialist. No joke. So and Bernie Sanders thinks he's open about the fact that he's a democratic socialist or whatever I don't know what he calls himself, right? But yeah, anyways, okay, by 1916, Britain had been funding much of the empire's war expenditures, including 2/3 of the war costs of France and Russia. But it starts drying out. So here's the key word. This is gonna make me so excited. Listen to this. Between 1917 and 1918, Britain, remember London was the #1 top dog then, has to borrow $4 billion from the US Treasury. There's your changing of the guard. Okay? When America gets involved and will only lose 65,000 men, and not have the war devastate their land, as Dave said so correctly, and have to rebuild out of the rubble, we also have lent the British $4 billion. In New York City is going to become the world center of banking. New York City is going to become that Frank Sinatra, if I can make it there, make it anywhere type #1 top dog place. That was not the case before this. London used to be that. This is the changing in the guard. Thank you, World War I, again, for all your long-term effects, number 91 now in this class. Like, if you're like, why is New York Wall Street, 1% occupy Wall Street? Why is New York so important? World War I. All right. but already by the last 19 months of the war, American factories are producing smokeless powder at a rate almost 50% higher than combined production of European allies. If you want to talk about Henry Ford later, the kind of the golden age later on, baby boom, post World War II, American factory life, like the factory worker in Detroit being able to support his family easily, he makes 90 grand a year. Like the development of American industry, the domestic economy, World War I begins to see this. Shipment of American raw materials and food enables Britain to not starve. Not only are they letting the money, lots of food supplies, all this type of stuff. And in fact, the Baldwin manufacturing company, one of these people here, they manufacture over 6 million artillery shells and 2 million rifles and provide Russia, France, and Britain with 5,000 locomotives and trains.
Wow.
I mean, this is incredible, right? Yeah. So this is the growth of America into what we have become. Purple Mountains Majesty, 5,000 trains to.
They didn't send those UPS. They sent-
Not by UPS, but so much money, $4 billion to 2/3 of artillery shells. Why is it not on that? Why is it not a song? Like,
Yeah.
giving credit to American economic prowess. All right, well, how do we also balance it, my friends? Well, while we're also funding them, we have to be tightening our belts at home. So you see the birth of things like victory gardens at home. They tell young boys, like my boys, my 8 and 4-year-olds at school, we gave this number 1, you should be patriotic to the core. Get it? Don't throw your apple half-eaten, eat all of your apple, because food is gonna win the war. I'm dead serious. Patriotic to the core was the stupid punny sounding kind of crap, but that, yeah, like eat all your food, clear your plate. The original idea of like clearing your plate, World War I, it long before like that the guilt trip parents will often make their kids, and it is, we should respect that. Like there's starving kids in Africa, you're lucky to have food, that's true. But that classic thing, before that is if you don't eat your food, you're wasting food that the troops could use. Food will win the war. We're supplying so much of the Allied effort, you have to eat your plate. You have to eat your plate. Creepiest part of World War I. World War I is the invention of propaganda. World War I is the first Instagram, Twitter, trending topics, Facebook stuff. That's what I really want to show you in these pictures. And actually, before I go there, let me just stop for a second. I'm going to come back to that. The Black Tom explosion. Let me read you the stats of this. This is what will take. Here's all you have to know. Just kind of like 1, 2, and 3 equals 4. Just the facts. We talked about a lot of stuff and we bounced around a lot. But here's the thread I want you to connect on this point. I said, because of the demographic realities in America, because of the fact that a lot of Americans are German, a lot of the idea early in the war is to stay neutral so as not to offend or isolate or just kind of like put to the side a large contingent of the US. What did I say is number 1, which creates the idea that maybe we should be against the Germans, they're the bad guys. It's the U-boat submarine warfare, it's the sinking of the Lusitania, it's the violation of the Sussex Pledge. This is the second big one. On July 30th, 1916, July 30th, what's going on now? Verdun, the Somme, the Brussels offensive, right? There's an explosion which is credited to, blamed on German agents destroying US munitions that were meant to be supplied, sent to the Allies in World War I, valued at $20 million, which today would be $500 million of munitions. The explosion is equivalent to 45,000 kilograms of TNT, okay? Was the equivalent of an earthquake measuring between 5 and 5.5 on the Richter scale, felt as far away as Philadelphia. Windows are broken in lower Manhattan, 25 miles away. Some window panes in Times Square are shattered. The stained glass in St. Patrick's, again, 20 miles away, is broken, is destroyed, shattered. This idea that not only are the Germans sabotaging our boats and killing people on the open seas, they're doing literally terrorism. And I think this is the worst like terrorist attack in America in terms of like explosive power or whatever, with the exception of Oklahoma City in 1995 and 9/11, 2001. Again, once more during World War I, July 1916. The question is, what do we mean by false flag? What is a false flag? I talked about this earlier. What's a false flag operation?
Yeah. Is it maybe if I'm American and I blow up a factory, but I'm flying the German flag when I do. It's like wearing somebody else's uniform.
Yeah, false flag is doing something yourself, blaming on someone else with desire to come. My company is repairing glass window panes. So every night I tell my kids to go out and shatter glass. False flag, right? They don't have to come to me to repair their stuff and make money. That's obviously criminal, evil, horrible, everything, right? Am I saying this is a false flag? No, but some people have claimed that. We do it ourselves. Americans actually blow this up, blame it on the Germans because duh.
Yeah.
Because that's the point. We want the Germans to be painted as terrorists and brutes and monsters. And that we're trying to, Woodrow Wilson knows, is getting closer to election now, what he wants to do after he wins re-election. If he does get involved in war, we need to have a freaking pretext. No one's gonna want to declare the Germans if they're just like a competitor. But if they're terrorists blowing stuff in New York, ooh, okay, that's good for us. And in fact, the Black Tom explosion results in the establishment of domestic intelligence agencies in the US. Just like after 9/11, you have this the installment of the Patriot Act, and it's kind of like now the government can like search your phone records, whatever, NSA stuff. Same thing happens here. Again, thank you, World War I. Whether the Germans do this or not, it's very good for a lot of things that we want to do. More surveillance, more intelligence agencies, and more anti-German sentiment. On that line of propaganda, last thing I want to talk to you about is the Committee of Public Information is founded. It's the first best example in world history up to this point, before Facebook, before all these kind of things, of wide-scale propaganda. All right. And this is established by a man named George Creel, the CPI. It sets out to systematically reach every person in the US multiple times with patriotic information. In fact, during films and movie theaters, there would be people hired to make patriotic appeals, 4-minute speeches. And Creel estimates that in 18 months of the CPI, having accumulated 75,000 volunteers, they delivered over 7.5 million 4-minute speeches to 300 million listeners in a nation of 103 million people. So people on average heard this 3 times. This is the #1 thing. Write down 3 things: German U-boats, then Black Tom terrorism, and this propaganda campaign. That by 1917, Americans are primed like, I hate Germany, I hate Germany, Germany's evil, I hate Germany, I hate Germany. Right?
And yet Lusitania was the
1915.
so they were willing to let that kind of walk.
Well, in a certain sense, I mean, not wash, but just like you can't underestimate how strong the desire was for neutrality in America. We really want to try to stay out of war. And Wilson and his guys, I hesitate to say henchmen, but kind of in some ways, but I have a very clear idea. If I get reelected, I'm not going to do that or keep us out of the war anymore. I really want to go to war. Set about how can we convince people to think Germany's bad. And if it's not enough by the Lusitania and the U-boats, and it's not enough, the terrorist thing too is not enough. We really need pictures. I'm going to show you the propaganda posters right now.
How long after the committee of public, when did people decide this is propaganda? Because like the way you say it, it's kind of accepted by everyone now it was propaganda, but like during the time where some people saying it was and some it wasn't, or like.
No, I mean, I think people in some ways, I would say overall, kind of take it hook, line, and sinker. But like, if you define what propaganda, go ahead. No, go.
I was going to say, well, of course, we're still doing that. And not to, get political here, but look at COVID. Get vaccinated, it's.
I wrote down COVID here. Literally, Olivia Rodrigo. I can't believe I know who this person is. Like, I do now, and I wish I didn't. Like, I'm sure she's a wonderful person. But the Biden administration hired this 18-year-old girl, right, with all this world experience and knowledge, and she's a virologist too. Wait, she's not. She at the White House talked about how awesome it is to get vaccinated and like do this with Anthony Fauci. It's like, and that's good propaganda because everyone should get vaccinated. That's horrible. It's bad. How do you feel about it? It's just straight propaganda.
Yeah.
Like whether you like it or not. Exactly. You have to define what propaganda means. It's an amazing question, Maria, because propaganda takes on this negative thing. Propaganda is something that's evil, trying to corrupt your mind. Everything, I'm wearing propaganda right now. Like this is propaganda, right? Like, oh, WSU, right? All right, that's down the road. I should go check out Pullman. This is everything's propaganda, right? I'm doing propaganda for Converse shoes. And then this is reverse propaganda. They're splitting down here. It's like they're not they're falling apart. So maybe they're not durable. Well, people know it's propaganda then, but they just are like, this is great. Like, we agree with this message. Some people are willingly seduced by the propaganda. I know I'm being sucked in. I want to be. I don't know. It's a tough question. I would say not like today though. Today we have in response to COVID propaganda. however you feel about it. There's a lot of pushback. I don't think it's that strong this time. There's still more of like wet behind the ears. Politicians are good guys, kind of thought. Really what changes that in American history is Vietnam. Vietnam was the first time like F all politicians, they're disgusting. Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, the Four Dead in Ohio song. That's later. That's that, you know, the kind of, you know, marching in the street protest generation of 68. Before here, it's kind of like, we trust our leaders, so they're saying this, it must be true. Olivia Rodrigo said it, it's definitely true.
That's our generation. Trish and I changed all that.
You guys were at Woodstock,
We got married at Woodstock,
really?
up on the stage.
By like a guy,
Jimi Hendrix is.
by
our
Jimi
witness.
Hendrix married
He's
you?
our witness.
He's your witness, oh. Did he do the guitar riff while he was?
Yeah, he did the American, the Star Spangled.
What about Janis Joplin? Was she there also?
No, no, she
No.
had some issues.
I think it's kind of crazy, yeah.
She was always jealous of Trish.
I see why. Good selection, Trish, not
It was
Janis
awkward.
Joplin. I heard you and Janis Joplin dated like 55 times.
Can we just move
Let's
on?
move on. It's their sore subjects. Yeah, I get it. Okay, so Trish is like, I don't find this funny at all. Please move on, seriously.
Leave me out
I
of this.
really don't like this stuff, seriously. Okay, this is Black Tom explosion,
And that was, again, where?
New Jersey.
Okay.
Again, right? Crazy. Felt, you know, 50 explosion heard in Philadelphia, broke stained glass in 20 miles. That'll do it. Whether the Germans really did it or not, that'll propagandize people, Maria, in terms of like, we hate the Germans. They did this, right? It's pinned on
And
them.
that was munitions factory? Is that
Yeah,
what
it's
it
like
was?
100,000 tons of TNT, it's just crazy amount of stuff. That whatever was used to blow it up is the kind of starter, but the stuff was also blowing up materials, like artillery shells, everything just, it was literally like, here, I'm gonna throw a firecracker into a bunch of firecrackers. They're also lit, you know, it's like everything. And this isn't funny at all, but I mean, it's kind of like, you could not make it more explosive, like dropping a bomb on a bomb factory. You know, like, the stuff is already there anyways.
People other than the people in the building die, like how you said.
I'm not
glass was
sure.
shattered,
Yeah, I'm not sure about the casualties. God rest her soul, it was one person, it's awful. The best example I can think of, you guys remember on August 5th, 2020, the explosion in Beirut?
Yeah,
There's that big
right,
thing, the little atomic bomb. This is like that. This
right.
is that kind of thing. This is kind of out of nowhere, like shocking kind of, what was that? You know, shit. Okay.
Right.
And when we can say the Germans did it, and I'm not saying they didn't, please don't misunderstand. I'm not saying, oh, it definitely was a false flag. I don't know. But Americans take it as the Germans did it, they're the bad guy.
So no one's ever figured it out.
I'll have to, again, if you email me with these reminders, please do too, seriously, because I miss a lot of stuff with cracks all the time. I'll try to look into it, see if there's been a definitive thing, but it's like, who's reporting on it? The Committee of Public Information, definitively, the head of Pfizer says you should do more vaccines, like, yeah. But there's probably conflict of interest there, right? You know,
I guess another example of that would be the WMA in Iraq,
yeah,
you know.
yeah, sure. So much of this stuff we're so familiar with, it's just the repetition of history, exactly, like we've seen this story before, yeah.
Well, I've heard it said that about the Zimmerman telegram, people suspect that like Britain, they're like, oh, we intercepted this telegram about how Germany wants Mexico to attack you, like they maybe made the whole thing
The
up.
only, yes, and that sounds, and Britain was in a very awkward position because they had tapped the American wires. And so, hey, we discovered this, how did you guys discover this?
Yeah.
Oh, we've been tapping you the whole time, and they had to kind of get around that somehow. The only reason I know that's not true, it's a great point, and I would be all in for that, is that Arthur Zimmerman, the guy himself, admits to writing it. And people don't know why, like how stupid, and like, yeah, I did it. He should have been like, well, at this time, the German Foreign Ministry has no comment, we're investigating the matters, and like politicians always say, he's like, yeah, I did it. You know, so like, unless he was an agent too, and he was bought out somehow, like he admitted writing it, which is like, wow, okay, we weren't expecting that, like, yes, case closed, we had all our lawyers and people ready to
It
investigate.
takes all the fun out of it.
Takes all the fun out of it.
Politicians admit.
Yeah, and you see, basically, so yeah, like, exactly, we have all this litigation plan, have Governor Jones impeached. And because we're ready, Jones can come in and say like, actually, I wasn't involved in it. Jones come like, yep, everything they say is true. I did it, I resigned.
It's like when Nixon resigned.
Yeah, yeah.
We're ready to go.
Gonna have so much fun with this, yeah. There's your electoral map. Here's the Committee of Public Information. Will you have a part in victory? Every guard and ammunition plant. destroy the map route. Enlist. Look, he's Germany is a bloody club attacking American women, right? And that's in Germany, the pointed helmet. I mean, that is
clubs there.
his clubs is culture. That's German culture.
German
First smack to the head. Oh, they're so cool. Bach and Haydn. No, they just kill people. This is propaganda in your face. Germany, evil guy, right? It's very simple to say. Maybe this one's better. What's the German monster? This is like vicious stuff.
Yeah.
This is long before Facebook and stuff. These are the posters being disseminated in the schools and the public square. People hate Germany. Your name is Schmidt. I don't care. Change it. In fact, the House of Windsor gets renamed in that famous year, 1917. Prince Charles, later on to be King William, Queen Elizabeth, Kate Middleton. They're the House of Saxe-Gotha.
Oh, that's right.
They're Germans. They
Yeah.
change it in World War I because of this kind of stuff. Can't be affiliated with the Germans. Keep the Hun out. Buy some protection with war stamps. Don't talk. The web is spun for you with invisible threads. The Kaiser is spider. That's creepy as fudge. Keep out of it. Help to destroy it. Stop and think. Ask yourself what you were about to say might help the enemy. America's answer. Committee of Public Information. See, negative stuff about Germany, positive stuff about America. You're probably like, wow, duh, tell me something I don't know. Yeah, because all of us are children of propaganda. This is 100 years ago. We've all grown up and it's so obvious now. When this first came out, everyone was like, whoa, I guess Germany's really, really bad because people never lie. Honesty is a virtue. So they must be really, this must be true. I want you for the US Army. I'm telling you, listen, boys and girls, you can help your Uncle Sam win the war by buying war bonds, war stamps. Teamwork builds ships.
This all looks like World War II stuff, it's.
Right, World War II just build off of these ideas. It worked good in the First World War, why not in the Second? Make the world a decent place to live in, do your part, government bonds. Wake up, Lady America. The winds and the words of war, right? We need it, when Wilson's getting along, we need to encourage people to get ready to fight the war. We're gonna pass the Selective Service Act. We need to get people excited. Look at, the Americans are sleeping at the wheel. Come on, help our people. His home over there, more than 2,000 such homes for our boys. This is like, his YMCA sponsored lodges, camps overseas. This is what your money's going to. When you're a patriot down in the corridor doing your victory garden, you're helping save America. And here's a message to all people. Do your part, wear your hair shirt, do your penance. People are in trenches getting eaten by lice. Don't walk around, in your best.
You couldn't wear your better, you didn't like, not that good shirt, is what you'd wear instead of the better.
Yeah, I dyed not pink, but like black. More color of severity or something, right? Pershing's Crusaders, Pershing is the dude, he's the, what's it called? The general, at the end who the American Christian Air Force. Goodbye, Dad. I'm off to fight for Old Glory. Just said it out. People in the Vietnam War would mock this. Ooh, Old Glory. But that CCR song, not a senator's son, right? Whatever. Like that Vietnam culture was mocking this idea of like fighting for Uncle Sam. Back then, this is totally serious. Like good job, son. Do your duty. They gave their lives. You lend your savings. How about Joan of Arc? She saved France. Women in America saved your country by buying war savings stamps. Women of feminist proclivities would hate this. Like, oh, Joan of Arc is to fight. My job is to buy war stamps. Wow, give me a freaking sword. I want to be like frontline Flora, little machine gun women in the trenches. But see, like, this cannot be more propaganda. Like, you as a woman at this time in America are like Joan of Arc, like the ultimate heroine, right? By just buying war stamps. Indeed, have you any women folk worth defending? Remember the women of Belgium. Okay, never forget about that's why you should hate Germany. What happened in Belgium? And these victory gardens, Uncle Samson garden, cut food plots, planted garden for victory. It's the last one after you were done. Just really quickly on the board, right here. So this is the whole breakdown. Okay, on this side of the equation is staying out of the war for America. 1796, George Washington, this tradition of American isolationism. We're going to stay out, plus 2.7 million German speakers. So that's the scale for staying out of the war. But for entering the war, Belgium, remember Belgium, we'll call it the atrocities, the rape of Belgium, as it was called, plus the special relationship we have with the Germans. Oh, excuse me, the special relationship of GB with the British, that we're feeling like, we've reconciled, we've made up from the revolution, the War of 1812. we're more in common with the Anglosphere. It's another point for getting involved in Senate allies, and we are funding them. Plus Lusitania, plus Black Tom, plus Zerman Telegram, plus finally Woodrow Wilson and his NWO goals, New World Order goals. Wilson literally is like, I can fulfill what I want, make the world safe for democracy, have a League of Nations, collective security, getting in on the side of the allies, and eventually this side wins out, obviously. Okay, I hope you guys have a beautiful weekend. I think next Wednesday, we've had 3 events, Vandal Intellect, Wednesday events in a row, Ask Me Anything, Father Chasing Myself, these are really fun, I haven't been to them before. They put like a box downstairs and can put questions in, and then Father, I think whoever MCs the event, maybe Anna will do it, or Andrew will pull it out and read it, it's real fun, I'm not sure where it's going to be yet, I guess Father will tell us, that's next Wednesday, but I will see you before then, next Tuesday. You guys have a great weekend, and thanks for coming, Maria. It's wonderful to have you back in class. And everyone on Zoom, let me walk over and delete you guys. Turn off your stream. Goodbye and good luck to you as well.